Hey, to the law enforcement officers, thank y'all for attending. Truly, appreciate it. Somebody carrying what they thought was a weapon coming down the town just a minute ago on the couch, whether it was or not. You're just like, what the world's going on in our culture? So, I don't know, maybe said that law enforcement, when we're holding our town hall, saw this person walking down, and it concerned law enforcement enough, they went outside of our town hall to go address it. So maybe they saw something that wasn't accurate, I don't know. But while we're just killing time, let me just say, y'all, we have to do something about the culture that is advocating for people to be so angry at each other. We really do. It's one, I know there's people in this room that don't disagree with me, and I welcome that. That's part of, civil discourse and what makes America great, is disagreement. But in terms of doing it in a way that people respect each other and not resorting to violence, it's just not a good place. So all of us have a chance to either fan the flame of that type of attitude or say, that's not what we do. Okay, we got 2 minutes before we start. 3. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off. And along the same lines of what I was just talking about, I don't know in terms of what the position he has in our church, but yesterday I heard this young man stood up on the stage of our church and was reciting 1 Corinthians 13 about speak with the tongue of angels, which fathom all mysteries that I had not loved, resounding gongs, a clanging cymbal, and then if I give everything I have to the poor, but if I have not love, it profits me nothing. If I string my life to the flames, but I have not love, it gains me nothing. Is the second. I'm probably butchering 1 Corinthians 13. It goes on to say, love is patient, it's kind. It's not rude. So I'm telling you this as a reminder to me that I have every desire today to be patient, to be kind, to not be rude. And my hope is that we can all listen to each other. How many of you have ever had a disagreement with your spouse, and the moment that you say something that's offensive or emotion takes over, then it just shuts everybody down, right? Nobody listens, everybody's offended, everybody's mad, nobody is open to hear and receive. And so town halls are designed, unless we all just want to, I came in this way, this is the way I'm going to be, and I didn't judge. Town halls are a place where we're supposed to be teachable, right? That includes me. So for all of us to come in and be teachable in our spirit, and if you have information that contradicts what I'm saying, when we get to the question part at the end, I want to hear the information, fact-based information. But I also want us to create an environment where all of us care about everybody in this room. We create First Amendment opportunity for everybody else, not just thinking about ourselves. And by doing that in an ordered, structured way, we'll make sure everybody can be heard. All right, I'm going to pray. I always do that when I start with town halls. Lord, I ask for your blessing. I ask that we would follow your mandate of loving each other as you love us. And we ask your blessing upon our discussion. We'd all be teachable in the name of Jesus. Amen. If you'll join me in a salute to our flag.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Who came in, by show of hands, with strong feelings on the one big beautiful bill? Who came in lacking information? Full information on the one big beautiful bill. So, let me just say this. It is called big for a reason. So what I'm going to do is, and I've counted these town halls, there'll be a discussion on this. So if anybody feels like this is unfair, we've done 106 town halls thus far in 2 years. I don't know if there's anybody in Congress that's done as many live town halls. And what I have to be able to do is, this is the largest change statutorily that we are going to see in a number of years. And it is important as you're hearing information that you are able to discern between that which is truth and that which is not true. And the only way to do that is to have source-based information be presented to you. Everybody in this room has been provided with a packet. I've been scrutinizing for months, because I'm on the budget committee, details, details, details. So this is months of work trying to make, not the packet, but the one big beautiful bill. The packet, I'm a budget committee member, I sit on the budget committee. The way the one big beautiful bill is structured, I've had more votes in the one big beautiful bill than most other members of Congress. The budget committee is the start and the stapler, and the movement process flows through the budget committee. And that's why you've seen votes that I've taken, why they've been more, had more of an exclamation, I guess you might say. Because the budget committee has had a number of votes and has been able to be a key part of the process. We already talked about the first part, about civility, and now let's talk about this very large piece of legislation. The packet follows by page number, so it should be easy for you to be able to go follow by page number. So look, this is the thing I'm going to highlight to you. This is what was going to happen on January 1 of 2026. It would have been the largest tax increase in American history. That's what was going to happen on January 1 of 2026. If we didn't take any action, before I got into Congress in 2017, Congress did a number of temporary tax changes. They were set to expire January 1, 2026. So we had to be able to go in and figure out, how can we be able to, with my concerns with debt and deficits, be able to find a way to continue the tax cuts and do it in a fiscally responsible way. Next slide. This is Billy, by the way. That's Billy. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would have been a 22% on average tax increase for everybody in this room. You would have seen a 20, so I want you to pause for a moment. I want you to think about your adjusted gross income, whatever you make every year, on average, think about that average. Then I want you to multiply point against 0.22, and I want you to realize that would have been less money in your pocket on the average, and that's on the average. Your individual circumstance will vary from that, but that was the average. The $1,700 for a family of four is what that average family of four in America would have seen their taxes go up. They would have paid that at the end of the year. 40, here's a second, he's anxious over there. 40 million is the number of families who have seen a child tax credit slashed in half. How many have children? How many of you have grandchildren? Now I want you to understand, a tax credit, the difference between a tax credit and a tax deduction. A tax deduction is what is not taxed. It's not your income that you say, we're setting that aside and we don't tax that amount. It's oversimplified, it's percentage based. A tax credit is a dollar for dollar based upon your tax liability. What you owe when you're tax credit, like however much I owe, if I hear a tax credit, I can take off what I'm supposed to pay the government, I get that amount back to me. Child tax credit prior to 2017 was $1,000. Permanence now on child tax credit is $2,200. So for every child or grandchild, you can ascribe there would have been $1,200 change in the tax liability, $1,200, real dollars, coming out of the pockets associated with every child on a tax return. Now there'll be some different things, different income brackets, but overgeneralizing a little bit. But just evaluate that against the credit, otherwise it would have happened. There's a $1,200 change now, and it's permanent. $1,200. Was in 2017 $1,000, now it's permanent, $2,200 per child. All right. 40 million people would have been impacted by that. There's 333 million Americans, y'all. It's a significant amount of people that fall in that category. And that's just parents. Your grandparents in this room, you're not even included. Right? 91% of taxpayers who standard deduction will be slashed in half. How many of you use the standard deduction? Why do you use the standard deduction? Because you're like 90% of all taxpayers in America who use the standard deduction. But prior to 2017, it was set at $6,000. Jack, if I say something wrong, you educate me, okay? Yes, sir.
Can I ask about the number on grandchildren? That's only if those grandchildren are supported, claimed on the tax return.
Well, yes, I'm just saying.
If my kids have kids, that's not going to impact me.
Good point. I hope I wasn't misspeaking there. I was just making you understand
I just wanted to make sure
for your children's vantage point. That's correct. Yes, if I made that hazy, I apologize. Y'all, and then in terms of big questions, we're gonna have question time at the end. Something quick, and you point something out, but let's just keep going, because this is gonna take a while. I've done this once already, and it's gonna take a while, but we have to go through this so we get everybody with facts in front of you, and it's gonna really inform us when we get to questions. Okay, 26 million number of small businesses. That could be as much as 43.4. Jack, have you been able to verify that, 43.4?
That's correct.
Okay. I thought it was 37%. You're gonna educate me when we get out of this town hall as to how we got those extra 7 points.
Yes, sir.
But whether it's 37 or 43, how many of you have an LLC? Who has a sole proprietor? Who just has a business owner? You were facing, because when I had my little dirt works business, my dozer excavator trucking business, the reason why I had my LLC was so if a dozer or an excavator hit something, then I wouldn't lose my home over it, right? I had a general liability policy that if I had to lose the business, that's one thing, but to lose my home, most people, for the ability to be able to not lose everything, set up an LLC, especially in the construction world, and so that's an LLC, but the LLC is just a pass-through when it comes to taxes. Whatever your tax bracket is on the individual income taxes, that's what your LLC is gonna pay. So don't get the LLC, so you would have seen a massive tax increase as business owners, because that 20% deduction will be taken away from you. And we'll get into more, we'll delineate that more later. All right, this is something I want anybody that's on Social Security to understand. Because of the standard deduction, as much as anything, remember, it used to be $6,000, now it's $15,000 per individual. Because of the standard deduction, we ultimately made it to the one big beautiful bill, where if you're on Social Security, that 88% of you who are on Social Security will have zero taxation on your Social Security. Because of the way the standard deduction works. The one big beautiful bill could not, by law, I'll get that in a minute, touch Social Security. Reconciliation bills cannot touch Social Security. It's prohibited by law. But what we did by changing the tax structure, we were able to deliver on the concept of making it where senior citizens on Social Security that had zero income tax, 88% can now have zero income tax liability on Social Security payments. Permanently extends the double standard deduction. I talked about that. So the standard deduction is, yes ma'am?
The no tax on tips, and I'm not sure Social Security is included in that or not. Those expire in 3 years, right? And the permanent, tax.
This is detailed in, but I didn't get there because I'm trying to speed through. I'm sorry.
Are the tips permanent or not?
No,
They're
the
3
tips-
years. What about the Social Security part?
That is permanent. Is I goes in 3? Is it 3 years?
I'll double check.
Okay, we'll get back to you.
But the tax cuts for the billionaires are permanent, right?
No, I already see.
It says right there,
Yeah.
permanent extends to those things.
Now, we're not gonna do this. We're not gonna create, I'm gonna go through the bill.
Go ahead.
We're gonna be civil, and we're not gonna, when we get to the end, we'll go back to what you're concerned about, but I'm interested, I understand you. We're gonna get into the tax, who got tax relief, who doesn't, just stay with me, okay? In fact, I'm just gonna set a standard rule here, let's just wait to the end till we do the questions, okay? Because otherwise it's gonna turn into, all right. So, standard deduction, move to the next one. Child tax credit. Now it's 5,000, I'm sorry, 2,200 for the child tax credit. The adoption tax credit now moves to $5,000. Adoption tax credit is 5,000. The investment accounts for newborn. Y'all, Social Security, how many of you have concerns that your children may not have the same opportunity with Social Security because what's happening with Social Security insolvency? Okay? So for the 3-year time period, that $1,000 investment is a chance for those, and we'll see what the Congress does in the future. But it's a 3-year time period, but for that 3 years, that $1,000, that is something for those kiddos, those babies that are being born right now, to help with the concerns of what's happening with Social Security, they may really be in trouble with because of the insolvency issue of Social Security. You keep that in your mind. Permanent extends to 20% small business deduction. Again, your businesses are taxed at your individual rate, LLCs. So this is really about your income tax eligibility, but farms, ranches, all of that falls under that 20%, and so it's going to help you tremendously in maintaining that, which was started in 2017, and continue that. Expands health savings accounts. Let me say this, on page 26, 27, and 28, when we want to talk about what's permanent and what's not, that is delineated on page 26, 27, and 28. We'll get there again if you have time. But the difference between that which was permanent and that which wasn't, you'll find on 26, 27, 28. All right. let's just keep going, because I feel like we're getting bogged down on time. I don't need that long to read the time questions. Immediate expensing for equipment. Y'all, you buy a tractor. In my little dirt works business, if I bought a used semi, right? As you all know, there are times where you want to immediately, it's a real cost to you, and instead of over time, the depreciation value of that equipment, you want to be able to write it off, so it helps you in that tax year. You're not going to do that. Bonus depreciation. Okay? The safety net, farm bill. We had a farm bill that was expiring, so we did an extender to be able to come back and give us more time to be able to really address the farm bill. So that's part of one of the beautiful bill. We've already talked about the 20% deduction reduces out of your adjusted gross income, sets aside 20% of that, and says you owe no taxable income, no taxes on that 20%. That's the 20% deduction. Ranches, farms, small businesses, LLCs, sole proprietorships, estate tax relief. How many of you have a family member, or you can say that you've experienced through the death tax, losing a piece of property? Ranch, farm. My family experienced this, my extended family experienced this in the 70s from my mother. Okay? So it's really unfair. People would have paid taxes their whole life. Now they die, and they're taxed on their death again. So what this extends is, it gives you, if you're for the individual, valuation of your property. It protects your assets so you can pass it on to your kids and your grandkids up to the $15 million threshold. It's coming directly from an individual. It's passed through from a family where the dad or the mom years ago were married. One dies. Okay? Then years later, the other spouse dies. It's up to $30 million in that scenario. Jack, am I saying anything incorrect on that? No, sir. Okay. So that death tax, for those of you like me who grew up in production agriculture, like that's been a huge deal. People, that is really unfair. And so the one big beautiful bill ensures that. All right. What can the one big beautiful bill address and what could it not? It's about the mandatory spending. It's classified with 774. Reconciliation means to reconcile how much we bring in revenue based on how much we're spending, which we're overspending by $2 trillion. But it delineates the 74 Budget Control Act how much we could actually go after the spend to only mandatory. Only mandatory. In 1965, Congress had control over 66% of all spending. They're discretionary. Mandatory means it's on autopilot. Trustees manage it, it's adjusted for inflation, and it's just on autopilot. Congress every year is not voting to increase it. It's on autopilot. Payroll taxes. And payroll taxes are paid in. Trustees manage that for the payout. Social Security, Medicare fall in that, right? Okay? But what happened is post-Medicare being added in 1965 and other programs, food stamps got added into mandatory, other social safety net programs got added into mandatory. What happened was Congress, instead of having only 34% of the budget where they weren't voting on every year, and 66 they were voting on the 12 appropriation bill, now this is where we're at. Only 1/4 of the 12 appropriation bills is actually where we actually control what comes into revenue. Congress has lost the authority over 75% because of the mandatory. So the one big beautiful bill is a chance to go in when we know this is one of the largest drivers of how we're going to be able to address Medicaid and food stamps. Medicaid and food stamps in this. That's why the one big beautiful bill went after changes to be able to put work requirements on Medicaid and food stamps because they're mandatory programs. They're on autopilot. Okay? We could not, by law, go into annual appropriation discretionary spending. Here's another chart, page 7. The difference between the discretionary is down here. Okay? Total valuation. Look at that discrepancy again. This chart on mandatory, how large mandatory is, and discretionary. Look at defense spending, y'all. Defense spending is half of what we allocate money for every year. And as a percentage of the revenue, as a percentage of our gross domestic product, it's less. It's less than it was in many generations ago. Because all the other spending is crowding out the focus and attention on defense spending for our country. If you look at the 18 enumerated powers, when Congress, in the Constitution, it limits those 18 things that Congress is supposed to be involved in. Almost 1/4 of the 18 enumerated powers is supposed to be defense. And it's getting crowded out because we're doing things that are a violation of the 10th Amendment, which says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it are left to the states or the people. And so, all right, So what could we go after and be able to reconcile spend versus or revenue versus outlays? And so Social Security, no, prohibited. You cannot touch the reconciliation process. Social Security. Net interest, you got to pay it. You can't do anything to adjust that. I want you to look. We're almost spending $1 trillion a year now just in interest. In 2017, that was $300 billion. Interest is kicking our tail because of our debt spending and what's happening, just a circular effect. This is killing us financially. Medicare, we got to get a hold of our debt situation. Okay, so Medicare, President Trump said we're not going to touch Medicare in the one big beautiful bill. Other mandatory, this is where SNAP, food stamps falls into play, still mandatory, and then Medicaid. Okay? Everything else is discretionary. Here's the difference between what we bring in revenue versus what we spend. That deficit, 1.9, 2 trillion, moving to 2.3 now. I want you to notice how large individual income taxes are of all the revenue we bring in. So we get to talking about individual income tax collection here in a minute, and the brackets of individual income tax. I want you to know why it's such an important part of the debate. Because it's the largest driver. Payroll taxes. Payroll taxes set up in 1935 when the Social Security Administration was created, and it was designed, payroll tax at 7.65% you pay, matched by the 7.65 that the employer pays, or it's turned around, if you're employer, 15% total now. That was started initially just to support just to support Social Security. But in 1965, what happened was, it only used to be a 1%. When Social Security started in 35, it was 1% charged against you. 1%, not 7.65. But over years, other things have been added, like Medicare, and that's why it's grown to a sum total of 15%, 7.65 employee, 7.65 employer. But I want you to look at this. We had Medicare, it's supposed to be supported by the payroll tax. When it was added in 1965, that's why they increased it. They increased the tax. But I want you to notice how much revenue is coming in on payroll taxes. And I want you to compare it against how much the spend is on Social Security. We just have enough to cover Social Security outlays. Medicare is being pulled out for years now out of the general fund. Just want to make sure you see why we're such a structural problem financially in this country. Okay, so that's payroll taxes. Corporate income taxes. People, remember in 2017, we had among the highest corporate tax rates of any industrialized nation, like 35%. Now we dropped it in 2017 before I got Congress to 21%. You have a right to ask what happened in terms of our revenue. If you go back and look, in 2017, we're bringing about $250 billion in revenue on the corporate taxes. When it was dropped from 35 to 21, what would be your inclination? What would happen? You would think you'd get less. It's doubled since 2017. 200 years as a country on the corporate income tax. That's 250 by 2017. And by cutting the rate from 35% to 21%, the corporate tax collected has almost doubled in only less than 10 years. Bill Swagel, who may be a Democrat, he's the budget director, he pointed to this as a success. So there's wide understanding that you cannot deny that by the corporate tax rate, because people are bringing and domiciling their companies in the United States now, versus when it was among the third, fourth, second highest of all tax rates for any corporation headquarters, what were they doing? Moving it somewhere else so they can make more money. So this is an example of a tax reduction that brought in more revenue. All right, that's one example. All right, let's keep going. This is important because I want you to know that what has been our average taxation of you, the American people, since 1960s? Right here on the left-hand corner, 17%. We've averaged 17%. This is page 8 of your book. In your book. We've averaged 17%. And then look at the top black line. That's what we spend. See, it's what Reagan said. The reason we have deficits is not because we're taxed too little, it's because we spend too much. I want you to pay attention to, we were headed towards 19% before the One Big Beautiful Bill, which would have been 2% higher than the 60-year average of what the American people have felt was adequate taxation. Right? You tithe 10%, but you're giving your government almost twice that, right? There's a place where people feel like that government's got enough of my money and it's collected enough, and what you'll see is when that happens, they'll demand a tax cut. This country is pretty sympathetic to making sure that we pay attention to taxpayers. You remember the 1776 mantra, taxation without representation? It means a lot to this country. So that 17% average matters. We were headed towards 19%. We're going to be in the average after the tax cuts, after the one big beautiful bill, so we're going to remain in the average. This is the real problem. So again, reconciliation, one big beautiful bill, we have to reconcile spend versus revenue. Next slide. Billy, you did a great job. All right, so where did the tax relief go? Relative to changes in the federal income tax brackets. I want you to notice that 17%, the most tax relief went to those who made between $15,000 and $50,000. Relative as a percentage of what the one big beautiful bill accomplished. Between 15 and 50,000, 17% change. And each tax bracket goes up. The smallest percentage was above the 200,000 range. Okay? So just make sure we're talking about facts here. Okay? The lower income levels receive percentage of what they owe more benefit than those in the upper tax levels. Someone say, well, you got to tax people that make the most more. It's important to know, we already showed you they didn't receive as much tax relief percentage-wise as the lower income. But what is the tax brackets right now? Your tax, the 1%. What does the top 1% pay right now? In terms of, remember we showed you the bucket of income taxes is the largest bucket. It's the most revenue that comes into the federal government. It's a pretty important revenue source. Who pays the most income taxes? The top 1%, you look at the chart, how much of the percent of total revenue that the federal government takes in, they pay 42% of all income taxes. The top 1% right now pay 42% of all income taxes. All right? Top 1% earners. What about the top 20%, 25% of income earners? What do they pay? The top 25% pay almost 90% of all income taxes. The top 25% of earners in this country pay almost 90% of all income taxes. All right, let's go to the very top bracket here. The top 50%. That means the top 50% of income earners. What are the top 50% income earners? Oklahoma's average income is about $40,000. So it'd be anybody that would make above that average. Okay, if you make above $40,000 a year. What does the top 50% pay above that? I'm generalizing here for Oklahoma, just to kind of break down Oklahoma statistically. What does everybody in Oklahoma that makes above the average, what do they pay in terms of the income tax burden? They pay 97% of all income taxes. But guess what? Those who make less than that average, what percent of the income taxes does that group pay? 2.3% of all income taxes. And the constant you hear, the sound bites is, tax those who make more. Is this in line with taxation being just, in terms of the percentage wise? All right. Let's go on to the next slide. So what do the taxes actually pay? So here's the top. There are 7 graduated tax brackets who pays income tax. Guess what those who make $11,900 or less pay? The chart says 10%. But remember we talked about the standard deduction a while ago? Guess who the standard that 90% of all taxpayers utilize? And it says that you get to set aside now, after the one big beautiful bill, $15,000 that you are not taxed on. So guess what those who make less than $11,900 pay? Nothing. They would be at 10%, but they pay nothing. And in addition to that, how do you know what an earned income tax credit is? An earned income tax credit is a social program that is a refundable tax credit. Remember, credit is $1 for $1. Where your tax liability is, you get that dollar back if you get $1 credit. But a refundable tax credit says, even if you don't pay a dime in taxes, you get $1. That's what a refundable tax credit is. It gives you money even when you don't pay a dime. So many are eligible for, it's why you'll hear CPAs talk about those people who don't pay any income taxes, but some get $7,000, $8,000, up to $10,000 in more revenue in addition to whatever social safety net they would be getting from TANF, direct cash payments, Medicaid, food stamps, other housing, that they can still qualify for the earned income tax credit, which is further cash payment. So I just want, I'm giving us all information to have a full understanding when you hear people talk about where the tax burden actually lies. So do y'all realize that let's say you fall in the $48,000 tax bracket. Do you know that you actually don't pay that 22% of that $48,000? What you do is, for the first 11, that's why this bracket's in here, for the first 11,009, you pay 10%. And then subtract 11,000 away from that 48, and the next you pay 12%. And then whatever's left without subtraction, then you pay 22% of what's minus that plus that, among the 22,000 approximately. You only pay the 22 on the approximately 20,000 that's left over. So that's the way taxation works in income. You pay that rate on the first 11,000 under, then you pay that rate on the next 11. Does that make sense? So when you see the 22%, understand it's not that you pay 22% on the full 48,000. Okay, excellent. You can read this. This is White House information. It just talks about how you can further see who benefited from the tax reduction. Okay, Medicaid. Josh, what you guys do with Medicaid? What were the changes on Medicaid? This is what would have happened if we hadn't made changes on Medicaid. The black line is what happened with changes on Medicaid. What I want you to see is, over the window, is Medicaid going to continue to receive more money year over year? Yes. At the rate of inflation. We were growing government programs higher than our economy is growing at 2.6. Government has been, when I first got to Congress, they were telling us government programs are growing. We expect them to grow at 4%. Do y'all know what the average growth of the economy, of people gaining wealth year over year, is increasing one year over the other? It averages about 2.5%. So government programs have been growing sometimes almost twice the rate of what we could pay, and that's why this separation between revenue and outlays continues to widen, because we're growing government programs faster than the rate of inflation. So what we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill is we restrained this massive growth, $400 billion in 2020. By 10 years later, it was going to be $900 billion a year. That's what Medicaid's been doing. It's been like a hockey stick. And so what the One Big Beautiful Bill did is it said we ought to grow this program in effect at the rate of inflation. Okay? As the economy grows, we have more money. I want you to read page 14. On the left side, we put some time in to make sure we get the historical context. Y'all, Medicaid was originally designed up until 2014, right here. Until 2014. It was originally designed to be for the blind, aged, disabled, pregnant, disabled, nursing mothers, caretakers, those below the poverty line. That's who was supposed to be eligible for Medicaid when Lyndon B. Johnson, the presidency administration. So they are represented mostly down here. Okay? But post-2014, I want you to notice what started happening. The able-bodied, who weren't blind, who weren't aged, they weren't disabled, they weren't pregnant, they weren't nursing mothers, they weren't caretakers, they were able-bodied, post the Affordable Care Act of 2014, able-bodied people started getting on Medicaid. You know what happened? These individuals, state governments, were getting about a 60-40 on average match. 60% of the cost of a Medicaid procedure coming from the Fed, 40% coming from the states. But guess what the Affordable Care Act said? It said these people, we're going to give you $9 to every $1 the state spends. And so what do you think the rush for the states has been when you're getting $9 for every $1 you spend on a state versus $60 for every $40 you spend? Which one do you think states have been most zeroed in and focused on in terms of how they can bill the federal government? When they get a 9-to-1 match on the able-bodied, able-to-work population above the poverty. Now, I want you to watch the poverty line here. That's what, when we're looking at social programs, it's the poverty line we need to be focused on. Okay? I want you to watch what happened in the Trump administration right here, where the growth of the Medicaid growth of Medicaid dollars, flatline. Okay? No, it didn't even rate of inflation. kind of flatline, see that? We're talking about one big beautiful bill that's gonna erode during inflation. What happened to the poverty level when Medicaid spending remained consistent for a few years? It went down. Look at history. How often does that happen? Oh, wait a minute, one more time. Somewhere in the contract with America time frame, when Bill Clinton signed the work requirements. We're talking about Clinton-era work requirements that have proven themselves to bring the poverty rate down. That's why work requirements matter. If our real goal is to help people, it's to help get them out of poverty. Right? Okay. So here's the one big beautiful bill. This is their CBO numbers. Again, Bill Swagel, many people believe he's a Democrat. I don't know if Bill's a Democrat or not. CBO, we kind of believe has a bias. Okay? But they put out these numbers about what's going to happen with Medicaid. Let's go through their numbers of who they say is not going to be on Medicaid in the next 10 years. The first 1.4 million of those estimated to be uninsured are illegal aliens. Give me a few moments here in a minute. We're going to get to another chart. We're going to show you how California is taking the 9-to-1 match and gaming it to put illegal aliens on Medicaid. Almost all the growth that we needed, the cuts that we needed to be able to accomplish, if we could have just restrained California back to their 2020 time period, what they were getting from the federal government, we could have fixed some of the budget holes that we had going into the 1.8 bill. Just California alone, because of how they gained Medicaid. We'll talk about that in a minute. 4.8 million of those estimated to be 2034 are able-bodied adults. These mean they are able to work. They're able to work. They're not blind. They're not disabled. These are able-bodied individuals. Clinton-era like work requirements I showed you before has proven to lower the poverty line. So when you hear people talk about being thrown off of Medicaid, you're talking about people that the Clinton-era like work requirement says work, get an education, or do community service 20 hours a week. 20 hours a week. You know what we know by looking at the American Enterprise Institute? They just give up the time they spend playing video games and TV, and devote that to helping their community service, work, getting a skill. They're just going to be absent an activity that they could be doing something more productive. And they'll still remain on Medicaid. All right, 1.3. When you hear another number, 1.3, you're going to do without. That 1.3 are those people, for 2 years under the Biden administration, they didn't do income eligibility. Remember, to be able to qualify, original mission, traditional Medicaid, those above the poverty line. Biden era, they let 2 years lapse, where they allowed somebody to get on Medicaid, and they didn't go back and check and see if they were still income eligible. 2 years. And what we did in one big beautiful bill is, we said, we have requirements for who's eligible for Medicaid, and we're going to come back in 6 months, and we're going to see if you still meet that eligibility criteria. And if you don't, if you make above that to not be eligible for Medicaid, you shouldn't be on it. That's the 1.3 million that they're talking about. So when you're going to talk about all these millions of people, you're going to know exactly what the numbers mean. Let's go to the next. Okay? How much time do we have left? Because we're about to fly through these.
About 25 minutes.
25 minutes left?
Yes.
Let's go flying. This is the growth of Medicaid spending. I told you about the growth. That's the exact numbers that you can see. Medicaid is still growing. This is what's going to happen when you hear people say this, oh, the only service providers, hospitals, nursing homes, there is $50 billion. $50 billion put in the one big beautiful bill to address those concerns. $25 billion, well, every state will automatically have an apportionment. And then another $25 billion based upon need. So in addition to Medicaid still growing, there's this massive grant program out there that's new, that's going to service providers in the Medicaid population. This is the shell game of California. This is how they're taking the 9-to-1. Remember, it's 9-to-1. They get for every dollar they put out, they get $9. That's why prioritizing post-Obamacare, the able-bodied population, they get 9-to-1 match. This is the game that they played to put illegal aliens onto Medicaid rolls and to put it into other government spending programs. California, the worst offender. Active deficit reduction. Okay? Josh, you talked town hall, 106 town halls about debt and deficit spending. I'm on the budget committee. Some of you may have known I held up the bill when I was in budget committee. on numbers, on this wind and solar, because the numbers for wind and solar, we'll get there in a minute, $500 billion. $500 billion over a 10-year time period we were talking about. And I had to know that $500 billion in savings was going to materialize and not be untruthful. So I held the bill up. And, I know some of you are like, what is he doing? Chip Roy, myself, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde, we negotiated all weekend to be able to get to a really good product to make sure the math worked and we could have balance. Then, after we made the deal, sent it to the Senate. The Senate made adjustments, came back. I also had some consternation in that last 24 to 48 hours. And we, again, was called into the principal's office with the president and his team. And even up until late hours, the group of us were in discussions, getting significant assurances on what many of us went to Washington to do, that we had a means to make sure there was balance in what was going to happen. When we sent the bill over from the House, the balance was already here. This little dark blue represents the dollar figure changes in effect that the Senate made. So when I talk about balance now, what I have to be able to, in full truth, tell you is, in terms of the numbers that I believe to be the most accurate, that for the next 3.5 years, at 10% floor of tariffs, just for the next 3.5 years, that President Trump has already committed to, that by adding that in, that's where the balance comes from. Okay? Even though it wasn't in the one big beautiful bill, that 10% tariff floor for 3.5 years, not 10 years, creates the opportunity for the tax relief that you get to pay for this thing. Does that make sense? How do you break that out? This is what the CBO says. We were going to have a $3.4 trillion deficit. 2.6% growth is what the budget committee felt comfortable saying. CBO said 1.8. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to show you why CBO, based upon recent history, is not being accurate in their assessment of 1.8. We said 2.6. And don't let this, there's going to be redundancy here. This 2.6 means dollars right here in this chart. But weirdly enough, when they said CBO 1.8, and we said, no, we believe we'll grow at 2.6, the difference in dollar value of revenue coming to the Treasury between 1.8 and 2.6 expected growth was another 2.6. So because of this represents the difference between what the CBO says growth will be year over year and what we believe growth will be. You say, well, how can you back it up? In just a second, I'm going to go there to the next slide. This is tariffs just for 3 years, and if we get beyond, this is on page 19 of your handout, we get beyond the 3 years. What did Biden do with the tariffs that Trump put in the first several years? Left them in place. So if we get beyond the next 3 years, there is some great understanding that we'll probably have another one. This is gravy right here in terms of the deficit and debt. If those are left on past the 3-year window, that gives us $1.4 trillion over a 10-year window of budget surplus. Now, I wanted this full cushion to be in here because a lot of things can happen in a 10-year period. You can have recessions. You can have 2008 type collapse. I wanted, when I was fighting for it, to have the best numbers we could get. I didn't want to have to bank on any of that. I wanted our bill to be into itself. That's what we held out for, the four of us. We forced that change, and when we sent it to the House, when we sent it to the Senate, it was that, but then they have something called the burden rule and other changes that got made, and that's where this little blue represents the same changes the Senate made. I had consternation on that, made it plain, but at the end of the day, you can say the full Trump effect, and wanting the big beautiful bill, plus the 10% tariffs, plus the growth rate, is the balance, and the potential of tariffs rolling over the years gives us more opportunity for savings. And this year, on the appropriation spot, not even seen here, is another $500 billion. We represent almost that dark blue. If we'll hold flat, which was another part of our negotiation with the Budget Committee, we wanted a flat CR, okay? Flat budget this year. When I get back in a few weeks, we can pull off a flat budget. That's another $500 billion in savings over the next 10-year window. Okay, and the Budget Committee is going to strongest on that. All right, Josh, how can you say the 2.6% year-over-year growth rate is possible? Look at what's happened in the last several years. Look at what's happened over the last 50 years. We've averaged 3.1%. And under Trump, prior to COVID, I want to be clear, so I'm truthful, we were at 2.8%. Remember I said, well, no, things can happen. Okay? So I wanted more flex. And Biden, 2.7. That's why we felt like 2.6 was accurate and possible, okay? CBO said 1.8, we said 2.6. But it was the greatest investment in border security. Look, y'all, 700 physical mile of border wall, ICE agents, deportations. Some of you in this room will disagree with that. I'm on Homeland Security in addition to the budget. Necessary. We're not talking about 14-year-olds taking under bridges and getting raped right now. We're not talking about Trinidad or Logwood, what was happening. We are talking about people getting their CDLs, going out and turning it on a freeway and killing 3 people because they don't know how to pass it. They can't read English. And I got my staff working on that. I have a CDL. I'm in that world. It's craziness. Anybody got a CDL in this room? You gotta take a written test before you can ever get to the gosh, I'm forgetting, written before the, what's the, what do you call the part of the test that, oh my gosh. Well, it's where you have to know where everything is in your engine and check the tire. Pre-trip, thank you. Thanks, man. You guys see the note?
We did some at ICT.
Well, I'm glad you helped me out there. Okay. All the domestic defense things that we needed to do. Okay, I'm not gonna, because I'm gonna get to questions. And then, look, I want to talk about wind and solar. Myself, Chip Roy, we fought on wind and solar. We fought on wind and solar. Why? Because refundable tax credits, you have no income tax liability, and everybody in this room has to pull out of your tax dollars and hand wind and solar companies money. And it's going to be $1 trillion of money over a 10-year window. It's wrong. It's wrong. I'm against all of that type of corporate welfare. Okay? That is my philosophical position that tax law should be just, not philanthropic.
That's right.
And so I stuck sword in the ground on that, so I felt like it's the right thing to do. We had to stand pretty hard. I know some of you in this room are again saying, "What you doing?" We had to go out and explain it. We were doing what was right under a commitment to end the Green New scam, and that was a part of it. And even though it went to the Senate, they watered it down in part, we got significant assurances from the White House, myself and those in the room with the President. He saw the same thing that we saw. And if you saw 3 days later, there was an executive order relative to making sure abuses of what counts as commenced construction, the 5% safe harbor threshold, gets modified. To make sure that the abuse of who's getting into that time period that the Senate put in the bill that we didn't want, that we modify abuses there. All right. You say, Josh, why did you fight on that? Because why I've held it up in committee is because this is since 1992. How many times have we promised to get rid of the production tax credit for wind and it never happens? Congress has said, oh, we'll end it in 2 years. No, 2.5. 13 different times Congress always wrote the bill the way it was coming out of, if we hadn't stopped it in budget committee, it was going to be a repeat of 13 different times. And the 4 of us said, mine really was this deal. Others on the committee, the 4 of us had some different issues. Mine was, we're stopping this. I'm not going to go out there and tell people we're saving $500 billion on the Green New scam when I know the history of what's happened. I didn't know the history of this. I knew the history of what happened in the state of Oklahoma when I was fighting as a state lawmaker years ago. And I knew that we had truth in the numbers. And that's what I'm trying to give you is the truth in the numbers. So with that said, 26, 27, 28, 29, the rest of that is the intricacies of the tax changes. If you want to learn, educate with more definitions, Jack and I we put a lot of effort into making sure you have truth in the product. All right. With that said, we are going to structure questions to make sure everybody has a minute and a half to ask your question. First Amendment is preserved on the House floor for a very similar process. But so that people don't stand up and take time and somebody else can have to ask a question. So you're a minute and a half. And Josh, I want you to help me target people for the minute and a half. Or John, go for it, John, for the minute and a half. And we're going to start with the first question. You got a minute and a half, and then I'll listen. We'll move to the next.
Sheriff, I went to the convenience store the other day, and he had changed the price tags on 175 different items within the last 2 weeks because of the tariffs. Congress is supposed to be making the tariffs, not President Trump. It shouldn't be in one person's hands. He's caused some emergencies, some fake emergency stuff so that he can control the tariffs. I want my congressmen to be doing their job, which is controlling the tariffs and the budget, not letting them fall back to money for the budget. What are you going to do specifically to bring the prices down?
Okay.
specifically, what actions we are working on now.
So let me give you the latest numbers as I know them relative to tariffs. This summer, what we were seeing month over month changes was about 2.7%.
That hasn't kicked in yet.
No, well, when you talk to somebody, anybody in the housing, anybody in housing, did you build? Yeah. Okay, what were you hearing from your construction people for doors, windows, garage door openers? I'm just trying to answer your question. When the touting of this is going to take effect, what were you hearing from those people?
2% to 3% we add to our price per square foot.
So my point is, and having heard somebody in construction, those prices were being built in to the way that they were being disclosed to the customer. So when you see what we know is latest, if somebody knows later information I do, we're right now 2.7% month over month. I think that's what we saw in the summer. Y'all, what do we try to have be our consumer price index inflation? 2.5. We want 2.5. So I'm not denying that there may be some at 0.2% adjustment. Not denying that could be. We don't know what the long-term effect is. So if you're asking me constitutionally, you are correct. Article 1, Section 8 lists 18 things that the Congress has authority over. Among those is imports and duties, which is tariffs. So constitutionally, from long before I got there, Congress, deliberating these things, decided for flexibility, to be able to let the administration make adjustments, which can happen quicker than what Congress can on changing tariffs, okay? Let me tell you so constitutionally, Congress wrote statute aligned with what the Constitution said, to say, President, we want you to be able to do lateral, bilateral type adjustments.
Could you see in your power? Well, maybe we're inching toward dictatorship, and I don't see you doing anything. I don't see you doing your
So
job.
just follow me out. What do you believe is happening right now on the 10 square mile area of Washington, D.C.? What do you think should be happening there? So I want you to kind of see, make sure we're talking, that we stay consistent. Do you believe that Congress should be exercising authority, that the federal government should be exercising authority for what's happening in D.C.?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what's happened there is that Congress has given the 10 square mile area, right? And then years ago, statutorily, because of the intricacies of everything that Congress wrongly, in my opinion, got involved with, I showed you the discretionary mandatory sheets, started doing everything outside the 18 enumerated powers, like in state governments. Then they had too much to handle, and they said, well, we can't even manage the 10 square mile area that the Congress is supposed to according to the 18 enumerated powers. And so they handed home rule over to D.C. Constitutionally, Congress has the authority to pick up the reins to fix that problem, and the President's the chief law enforcement officer. Here's what I'm going to say to you. I have seen, just in my time in office, that there is great opportunity to solve international conflicts with flexibility on tariffs. You're hearing talked about the President putting immediate tariffs on people, on countries, and then bringing British peace. So I do think there's wisdom. Congress, constitutionally, no, we have the authority. At any point, we believe this thing has gotten way out of control for bringing it in. We have that authority. But when I see there being good deals and pieces being brokered by an accurate use of those tariffs, that is to our benefit. I believe what in 1796 in George Washington's farewell address, he talks about, I glean this when I read it, we should advocate liberty, talking about what we do in the international community, more by commerce than by force. The best way for us to want other countries to be able to follow what we're doing is make them envious of us by becoming so prosperous. It's why I have issues relative to the number of my votes. And we've got 10 minutes, okay? I gotta hurry to this question. But what I'm telling you is I am ready, willing, and able to exercise the constitutional authority of Congress if I feel like the fruit starts being bad on this front. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
I thought the tariffs were paid by the citizens, not by these other countries. So how is that bringing them into what the Trump wants? When it's all the tariffs are making, we're paying for the
And
tariffs.
it will lessen your desire to pay for Chinese goods coming in if they're taxed. If the cost of that good is 50% higher, right? Then you're not gonna buy it.
Well, how's that gonna help our economy?
It hurts the Chinese.
It hurts the Chinese economy.
So he's talking to the whole.
All right, John, I need to get back to letting you answer, or be the one that dictates.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
First, I want to thank you for doing it in person town
Yes,
hall,
ma'am.
because
most of your representative friends in my minutes, so thank you for
Yes,
doing
ma'am.
that.
Thank you for that.
My big concern is the national debt.
Yes, ma'am.
And you pointed out that that's a large concern of yours.
Has been.
The numbers that I'm hearing out of the CBO is that over the life of
Yes.
this bill, we're looking at a $5 trillion nearly increase to the national debt.
They say 3.4. They say 3.4.
I'm hearing a bigger number than that, but either way, that's putting issues on my kids and my
Well, they do.
grandkids that they shouldn't have. And what I'm seeing are the cuts that you're proposing are on the least of us, on the people that are on Medicare and SNAP. Those are the things you're focused on.
No, Medicaid,
Right.
Medicaid. Yeah, I just want to correct you, Medicaid. not
Medicaid
Medicare.
and SNAP. What I would like to know is why are we not focused on growing our revenue by getting more taxes in from that top 1%?
So what we are doing, when you put a work requirement, Clinton era work requirements, remember what I showed you the slide a while ago? Poverty level, under Clinton, when Clinton signed what Gingrich and the Republicans did, when Clinton chose to sign work permit, what happened to poverty level? It went down.
You
What?
also used to get benefits with jobs, and you don't get that now. So that's not really a fair
No, it isn't, hang on. What happened was our economy improved because those people that otherwise were on the receiving end, now they're being productive. Guess what they're doing? We moved them from being recipient of able-bodied individuals to being paying taxes. So what happens now is it will, as John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
And that will lift some of those bottom people, but we've got an oligarchy class in this country that is making tons of money. It's not trickling down. It has never trickled down since Reagan.
Where's
And
my-
why are we continuing
Where's my
to
slide on
do
the
this?
1%? So I want to answer a question,
Okay.
information. Can I borrow yours?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't see that one last.
Oh, I'm sorry. So here's the question, Cecil. If your claim is that the top one, so page 11, everybody look at this. If the claim is that the top 1% aren't paying their fair share, and they're paying 42% of all income taxes, what is enough?
Well, maybe the same percentage, they could pay the same percentage as the vote, they're not paying the
They-
same percentage.
Hang on, hang on. That's where y'all have a misunderstanding, I think, because look, so because apparently there's a misunderstanding. The bottom 50%, so look at this top number, I'm sorry,
Yeah, that's okay.
the bottom 50% of earners, wait a minute, am I right? No, I'm sorry.
Page 10, not page 11.
Page 10, thank you, apologize. Thank you. Okay, look at this, y'all. This is IRS data. The top 1% pay 42%, but the top 50% of all income earners are paying 97% of all income taxes. That means the people you're talking about. So the average wage, Jack, do me a favor, look up the average wage in Oklahoma right now.
It's 36,000.
Oh, I was wrong, right? It's 36, not more.
It's 60 before.
36. So that means everyone who pays under 36, who's making in Oklahoma, if you're trying to find the average, 36. Everyone who's making less than 36,000, guess what their share of the income? 2.3% of all income taxes.
But if we had more taxes coming in, that top percent would pay a higher amount of that.
So top 25%, the top 25% are paying almost 90% of all income taxes. My point is, for the claim that they need to pay more,
Yes.
they're paying unbelievably unfair percentages higher. You know, this is where I would tell you on tax justice. And some of you will disagree with me, but for those that are biblically minded, I want you to follow me. Okay? You may disagree with Isaac grasping my concept of justice in the tax code. Even in Ben Carson, remember when he ran for president? Ben Carson would talk about the tithe, the Levitical code of tithe. And he would talk about how the poor among you, which I believe God being the ultimate arbitrator of what's just, said even the poor among you, they have a percentage, a 10% percentage. And then it said if they can't even do the 10%, they at least have to get a pigeon. If God, being the ultimate arbitrator of what's just and how much is given to support something, says that everybody was on a fixed percentage, so it means if you made a lot, 10%, you gave a lot. If you didn't make much, 10%, you gave a little. if God's the, if you believe like I do, he's the ultimate arbitrator of what's just, how can we look at this and claim that's tax justice?
Well, God also says, to whom much is given, much will be required. And I would say that these people in the top 1% have been given a lot for this country. We paid to educate their workforce, pave their roads. We pay a lot
And
for
when
the common good.
and we need to
And
move
I
on to,
think they need to pay more.
and I'm gonna move on to somebody else, but I'll just say this, respectfully. I think that if you look at the stats and what the statistics tell you, they're paying way beyond what is proportionate, just, and fair already.
Warren Buffett famously said that he pays a whole lot less percentage-wise than his secretary. We just
It's
want them to pay the same
It's
percentage.
not true, percent not. So I've gone through you got the data, I've showed you the proof. If you wanna give me data, okay, we got 4 minutes left. Sorry, y'all, we gotta hurry through. Who else?
Good question, right?
We gotta hurry through others, I'm sorry for not
Mine's
getting.
kind of a complaint. Can anybody here in, this room pick up the phone, call Congressman?
No, he
Senator,
probably
or
won't call
governor,
back, he
or
won't
anything?
answer emails.
Every
No.
politician in Oklahoma has a phone screening system.
That's right.
Whereas, they decide, the actual congressman or senator may be interested in what you're doing. I have a patent that will probably increase gas mileage on electric vehicles, maybe even 50%. I can't talk to anybody. I'll probably wind up having to affect my business in another state, because I can't talk to anybody.
Sir, I've read your field report. I know you're in the Checotah area. I think I met with you 20 years ago when I worked for Tom Copeland. I think I came on site and met with you 20 years
I'm talking
ago.
to your people on the phone.
And I've read your field report, and I've read your information, but the job of Congress is not to,
Okay,
is to not promote individual
I
businesses.
know, but you're Oklahoma congressman.
Yes, sir.
And I realize all this other stuff you're looking at is extremely important. and everything.
So I can't use my office to advocate your business ideas.
That's what I'm talking about.
It would be unethical for me to, what am I missing?
I didn't ask for help. I just need, if somebody's gonna help me promote, get to where I need
I
to
can't
get.
do that. I can't even, by a house ethics. There's a video I wanted to show yesterday about the genocide that's happening in Syria. There's a genocide happening in Syria. I wanted to put that on our social media page because all the attention is not getting 60 miles north of Israel of this genocide that I'm convinced al-Shar is perpetrating upon its own people. I wanted to put a video, but because in that video, there was a request for a business to get funds by house ethics, I couldn't do that.
There's a lot of things that get funded that don't even need to be funded.
But I want you to know, I'm aware of what you do. I've read, you had my staff out. I've read the field reports. If you need communication to me, I've read it. The answer is, I cannot promote what you're doing or I'd be in breach of house ethics.
Once you promote, I just want to be able to talk to somebody that can actually help me keep my company in Oklahoma
Okay.
instead of having to move to another
So
state.
what exactly do you need from us?
Well, I have a patent that's issued about 2 months ago on, that, increases the mileage on electric
I
vehicles,
understand that.
substantially. I would say 30, or maybe even 50%.
Okay, but you,
Nobody's interested.
so I can't make people want to be interested in your patent. Like, as a member of Congress, I'd be breaking house ethics to get people to buy into it. You understand? I can't promote an individual business. Now, what I can do, if you're having trouble with the patent office, because that falls under,
Well, they're gonna issue me a patent.
look, Josh, would you follow up one more time? You wrote a field report to me on this. I read it on a plane somewhere. If there's practically things that I can do, tax structure, information, and it's what we are allowed to do as a member, I'm happy to help you. But I think most of your issues would be answered on the state level. Because that's what you really need, is a conducive environment, tax environment on the state level.
We have time for one more question. So go ahead, Deb.
I'm a great citizen.
Yes, ma'am.
My husband was 100% disabled vet. And when I turned 65, both of those entities told me that I had to pay for Medicare Part B, or they would drop me. So the Indians are federally funded, Champ VA is federally funded, and they told me I had to go to another federally funded and pay to get health care that they've been providing for, well, not Champ VA, but the previous. have been running healthcare for 64 years for me. So we got 3 different federally funded programs that are paying for my healthcare now. Why do I need all 3?
So, what are you asking me in terms of,
So how come they're taking federal funds
okay,
from 3 different programs
yes?
to provide healthcare?
Look, I'm all in favor of efficiencies where we can find it, okay? McGirt and what's happened post-McGirt has created another patchwork of Indian Health Service funding. And what John knows, my chief of staff, we've worked with tribes in northeast Oklahoma, telling them we would love to make sure there's efficiency of healthcare provisions that are out there. And where you all can prove that you're being much more efficient, then that's the type of models that we want to be behind. So I don't like inefficiency. And if you got ideas for how we can make it much more efficient, I'm all ears.
That's crazy to me. 3 different programs.
So I'm not gonna claim this moment to be a healthcare expert, I'm on budget. Wideview Healthcare is one of our largest drivers. I'm interested, you gotta still give me grace, I've been here 2.5 years, still got a lot to learn. You got an idea of how we can improve efficiency, I'm all in. John, we got it. So where's our next town hall? Muskogee. So if you wanna come to Muskogee, you're welcome to come to Muskogee. I apologize for our coming in, coming out, when we're doing these town halls, we're trying to just, make sure for time, drive and all that. Appreciate you being operating with civility, being reasonable. We've created an environment here where we have to listen to each other.